I sit alone in the muted light of my Westchester apartment, the quiet hum of the city beyond my window blending with the steady tick of a clock on the wall. Tonight, as dusk deepens into a soft evening, my mind drifts back over years that have shaped my life, each memory a delicate mix of joy and sorrow. I am surrounded by photographs that capture moments of bliss, images of a younger me, laughing with unwavering optimism, with Claudia by my side, her smile radiant in sunlit parks, and our daughter Lily, her laughter echoing like a promise of hope. Yet amid these cherished memories lies an undercurrent of turmoil, a storm that has grown steadily over time. It is a burden that I cannot easily shake, the persistent, haunting question of whether Lily is truly mine, a doubt that has seeped into the corners of my thoughts since the day she was born. I recall the first time I held Lily in my arms, a moment so pure it felt as though the universe had aligned to affirm the love I had for both her and Claudia. In those early moments, every heartbeat, every gentle touch, whispered that nothing could ever alter the bond we shared. However, as the years passed, the seed of uncertainty was planted, quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it burgeoned into a silent accusation that now shadows even the simplest of moments. Tonight, as I lean back into the soft embrace of my favorite armchair, I can almost hear the echoes of laughter and the soft murmur of conversations that once filled our home. Yet beneath the surface of these fond recollections, I am haunted by the relentless need for proof, a need born not of suspicion alone, but of the fear that without confirmation, everything we have built might be at risk. Every photograph that lines the shelf serves as both a reminder and a challenge, a reminder of what once was and a challenge to the foundation of trust that I have long clung to. The golden afternoons spent walking hand in hand with Claudia, the tender moments of quiet intimacy that defied the harsh realities of the world outside, now seem to shimmer with a bittersweet quality. I find myself wondering if those moments were genuine reflections of an unbreakable bond, or if they were, in some way, laced with secrets that could unravel our very existence. As I trace the outline of Lily's smiling face in a framed picture, my heart swells with love and simultaneously tightens with dread. What if the love I felt, the certainty I once embraced, was nothing more than an illusion, a fragile construct built on hopes and dreams rather than unassailable truth? The apartment, filled with soft furnishings and mementos of our shared life, now feels as if it is steeped in the weight of unspoken questions. The gentle clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug as I stir my tea reminds me that even the most ordinary moments can be laden with profound significance. I often replay conversations in my mind, the earnest debates that began as gentle inquiries and morphed into impassioned pleas for clarity. Claudia's eyes, once warm and inviting, sometimes hardened with an expression that hinted at secrets she was determined to keep. The silence that followed those discussions was more deafening than any argument, and it left me to wrestle with the uncertainty alone. In this quiet evening hour, I feel the duality of my existence acutely. The undeniable pull of love that binds me to my family and the corrosive doubt that threatens to tear that bond apart. The questions that arise are not mere curiosities. They are existential, reaching into the very core of who I am and what it means to be a father. I have always believed that truth, once uncovered, brings liberation. Yet, the fear that the truth might shatter the delicate fabric of our lives looms large. I find myself drifting between the comfort of memories and the treacherous realm of possibility. What if the truth is not the savior I hope it to be, but a force that will leave behind irrevocable scars? The evening light gradually fades, and with it, the sense of timeless calm that usually accompanies my reflections. Outside, the city lights begin to twinkle, a reminder that life goes on regardless of the internal battles waged behind closed doors. I am both a witness to my own history and an active participant in the unfolding drama of our lives, a drama that is as complex as it is painful. I have spent countless nights mulling over every detail, every conversation, every look exchanged that might hint at a hidden truth. The weight of these memories and doubts presses upon me, yet I cannot allow myself to be consumed entirely by them. Instead, I cling to the hope that one day the answers I seek will come forth, dispelling the shadows that have long haunted my mind. In this solitary moment, I am forced to confront the paradox of my existence. I am a man whose love for his daughter is unwavering, yet I am tormented by the possibility that the foundation of that love is built on something less than certain. The photographs on the wall, the soft hum of the city, and the quiet whispers of the past all converge in a single, profound realization. I must embark on a journey to reclaim my peace of mind, even if that journey means confronting painful truths that may forever alter the course of my life. The night deepens, and with it comes a determination to seek clarity, to push beyond the comfort of cherished memories and face the storm head-on. Though the prospect of uncovering hidden truths fills me with apprehension, I also understand that the relentless quest for honesty is the only way to truly honor the love I hold for Lily. As I rise from my chair and walk slowly toward the window, I let the cool evening air wash over me. I breathe deeply, aware that this moment is both an ending and a beginning. A time to reflect on what has been and to prepare for the trials that lie ahead. The path forward is uncertain, shrouded in questions that refuse to be silenced by mere hope or denial. Yet, as I stand here in the quiet of my apartment, I am resolved to meet the future with both courage and a steadfast commitment to truth. The storm of doubt may rage within me, but I am determined to find calm within the tempest. In the silent dialogue between my heart and the night, I vow that whatever the outcome, I will honor my responsibilities as a father, and I will seek the clarity that is so desperately needed, even if it comes at a great personal cost. The calm exterior of our home belied the turbulent undercurrents that had begun to seep into our daily lives, a truth I could no longer ignore. I remember the early days when our conversations were filled with dreams and gentle reassurances, a time when every shared laugh and whispered secret deepened the bond between Claudia and me. Yet, as our lives grew more intertwined and Lily's presence became the heartbeat of our existence, subtle hints of discord began to emerge, hints that spoke of a question we dared not voice outright. I recall long, contemplative drives along the Hudson River, where the landscape seemed to mirror the fluidity of our emotions. The river, moving steadily toward the vast unknown, became a metaphor for the unspoken question that hovered between us, a question that threatened to destabilize the delicate balance of our family life. Every evening during those drives, I would catch Claudia's fleeting glances, eyes that shimmered with a mix of sorrow and defiance, as if she carried within her a secret too painful to share. The silence that followed these looks was deafening, filled with the weight of unasked questions and unanswered concerns. I found myself wondering whether the comfortable routine we had established was merely a facade that masked deeper issues. Was it possible that beneath the layers of our shared history lay a truth too uncomfortable to confront? I tried to convince myself that the love we had nurtured over the years was strong enough to withstand any challenge, but deep down, I sensed that this unspoken question was slowly eroding the foundation of trust that had once seemed unassailable. In the quiet moments at home, as I watched Claudia move about our modest living space, there were fleeting instances when her eyes would dart away from mine, a silent plea for me not to pry too deeply. It was as if every time I attempted to broach the subject, I was met with a wall of defensiveness and guarded emotion. The tension between us was palpable, growing more insidious with each passing day. I remember sitting at our kitchen table, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the muted strains of music playing softly in the background, and feeling an overwhelming sense of isolation. Despite being in the same room, Claudia and I seemed to inhabit parallel worlds that were once perfectly aligned but now drifted further apart with every unspoken word and every avoided conversation. There were moments when I would revisit the timeline of our relationship, trying to pinpoint when the undercurrent of doubt first began to take hold. It was not a sudden, dramatic shift, but rather a gradual erosion of certainty, a slow decline marked by small, seemingly insignificant incidents that, in retrospect, carried immense weight. The reluctance to discuss the matter openly, the brief, charged silences during our private conversations, and the almost imperceptible shifts in her tone when the topic of paternity was mentioned all contributed to a growing sense of unease. I began to question not only the integrity of our shared memories, but also the very nature of trust itself. If the foundation of our relationship could be so quietly undermined, what did that say about the strength of the love we once celebrated? In an attempt to bridge the widening chasm between us, I often tried to initiate discussions that would bring us back to the simpler times of mutual understanding and trust. I recalled the countless evenings we had spent discussing our dreams for the future, the promises we made to always be honest and open with one another, and I clung to the hope that we could, somehow, rediscover that lost connection. However, every attempt to address the unspoken question was met with resistance, a firm denial that any issue existed, coupled with an insistence that our love was beyond reproach. Claudia's dismissals were not merely rejections of my concerns, but felt like deliberate attempts to stifle a conversation that she was determined to avoid at all costs. The internal conflict that arose from these interactions was maddening. I found myself oscillating between the desire to trust wholeheartedly in our shared history and the nagging fear that I was being deceived by circumstances beyond my control. This dichotomy played out in every facet of my life, from the way I interacted with friends and family to the quiet moments of introspection that punctuated my nights. I would lie awake, haunted by images of happier times, a shared laugh during a family picnic, the gentle embrace of Claudia on a cool autumn evening, and yet, these comforting recollections were tainted by the specter of doubt. How could something so precious be built on a foundation that might not be as solid as it seemed? There was a point when the weight of these unasked questions began to affect my very identity. I felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a web of conflicting emotions that left me questioning every aspect of my role as a husband and a father. The realization that a single unanswered question could hold the power to disrupt an entire family was both terrifying and humbling. I started to see that the issue was not merely about proving paternity, but about affirming the fundamental right to know, to trust, and to love without reservation. The notion that our future could hinge on the revelation of a truth I had long feared was a burden I could no longer ignore. As I drive back from those long journeys along the Hudson, the city's lights merge with the stars above, creating a canvas of hope and uncertainty. The road ahead, much like our future, remains shrouded in ambiguity, with every turn promising either a moment of clarity or a deeper plunge into doubt. I have come to understand that this is not a battle of right versus wrong, but rather an internal struggle between the need for affirmation and the fear of confronting a potential fracture in our reality. In these moments, I find myself engaging in a silent dialogue with the universe, seeking guidance, reassurance, or perhaps just the strength to face whatever revelations may come. The unspoken question continues to hover over our lives, a persistent reminder that even the most profound love can be undermined by uncertainty. And as the days turn into nights and nights into days, I remain caught between the comfort of cherished memories and the relentless pursuit of truth, a truth that I must seek not only for myself, but for the future of our family. The journey is as daunting as it is necessary, and with every passing moment, I steel myself to confront the questions that have haunted me for so long, aware that the answers, however painful, are essential for our healing. I often find myself wandering back to the early days of our love, a time when every glance exchanged with Claudia was imbued with the kind of passion and promise that felt eternal. Those were the days when hope was boundless and every shared secret seemed to forge an unbreakable bond between us. I recall the tender moments spent under the golden glow of a setting sun, when our laughter mingled with the rustle of autumn leaves, and the future stretched out before us like an endless horizon of possibility. Back then, there was a simple, unspoken belief that the love we shared was as natural and indisputable as the rising of the sun. Every smile, every gentle touch, affirmed a certainty that now feels as fragile as glass. In those heady moments of early romance, I did not fathom that the question of paternity would one day cast a long shadow over our lives. Instead, I reveled in the simplicity of our connection, trusting implicitly, believing that love alone could transcend any challenge. I still remember the spark in Claudia's eyes, the way her laughter would light up even the darkest of days, and how effortlessly we had built a world that was entirely our own. But as time wore on, the unrelenting tide of doubt began to seep into the edges of my consciousness, like a slow erosion of stone by the patient drip of water. The arrival of Lily, our beautiful child, should have solidified the perfection of our union, yet it brought with it an unforeseen complication, a quiet, nagging suspicion that I fought to suppress. Each time I looked at her, so innocent and radiant, I was reminded of the unspoken reality that lingered in the background. While my heart overflowed with love for her, a small, unyielding voice whispered in the recesses of my mind, "Is this truly your child? Can you be absolutely certain?" That internal dialogue was not loud, but it grew louder with each passing day, intruding into the moments that were meant to be filled with unalloyed joy. Claudia, with all her strength and grace, had always dismissed the possibility of any external interference in our love. In her eyes, our bond was sacred and beyond reproach, a truth that did not need validation from outside forces. I remember the evenings we spent in quiet conversation, her hand resting gently on mine as she reassured me that our love was self-evident. Yet, for all the warmth in her words, there was an unintentional sharpness that betrayed a deeper vulnerability. It was as if she was guarding something, a secret so fiercely that any challenge to our narrative was met with defensive fervor. As the years passed, I began to realize that the certainty I clung to was being undermined not by evidence of betrayal, but by the absence of reassurance. The very act of dismissing the need for a DNA test, for example, felt to me like a refusal to engage with the reality of our situation, a refusal to provide the affirmation I needed to silence the doubts gnawing at my soul. I found myself trapped in a paradox. I believed in the love that had once seemed so pure and unassailable, yet I was desperate for a tangible confirmation that the life we had built together was indeed grounded in truth. The more Claudia resisted the idea of testing, the more isolated I became in my certainty, forced to navigate the labyrinth of my own insecurities without the reassurance I so desperately craved. In the quiet hours of the night, when the world was hushed and only the soft whispers of my thoughts accompanied me, I would replay every memory, each shared moment, every stolen kiss, and every word of endearment, with a scrutinizing eye. Was there something I had missed? Had there been a subtle sign, an incongruity in her demeanor, that now pointed to a hidden truth? The pursuit of certainty became an obsession, one that colored my every interaction with a shadow of doubt. The passion that once defined our love now seemed intermingled with a bitter aftertaste of suspicion, and I was left wondering if the very essence of our relationship was at risk of being tainted by the relentless need for validation. I began to notice the small things. The fleeting hesitation in her smile when I casually mentioned the idea of a DNA test, the slight change in her tone when our daughter's paternity was alluded to in conversation. Each detail, no matter how minor, was meticulously catalogued in my mind, building a case that I could not simply ignore. This internal scrutiny was not born out of malice, but out of a desperate need to reconcile the love I felt with the fear that everything might be built on an illusion. It was a silent battle, fought in the privacy of my thoughts, as I struggled to maintain the facade of unwavering faith while grappling with the unsettling possibility that the foundation of my family was not as secure as I had once believed. There were days when the tension was so overwhelming that even the simplest act, a shared meal or a quiet evening at home, became a battlefield where unspoken grievances clashed with heartfelt declarations of love. I felt caught in a maelstrom of emotions, a whirlwind of longing, betrayal, and the desperate yearning for assurance. In those moments, every gesture, every look exchanged with Claudia, was imbued with layers of meaning that I was forced to decode on my own. The intimacy we once shared now seemed tinged with an undercurrent of conflict, as if the very act of loving was now entangled with the need for evidence and the fear of deception. This internal dissonance reached a point where the simple act of holding Lily became a reminder of the duality that defined my existence. In her innocent eyes, I saw a reflection of the love I had so deeply cherished, yet I could not escape the gnawing suspicion that threatened to cast a pall over every joyous moment. The constant interplay between love and doubt was a torment that left me questioning not only the authenticity of our past, but also the viability of our future. How could I fully embrace the happiness of our shared life when every fiber of my being was attuned to the possibility that the truth might be far more complex than I had ever imagined? As I navigate the labyrinth of my own emotions, I realize that this struggle is not merely about seeking external validation, but about reconciling the disparate parts of my identity as a husband and a father. I am a man caught between the irresistible pull of a love that defined my existence and the insidious whispers of doubt that threaten to unravel it. In every quiet moment, I am forced to confront the painful reality that the certainty I once took for granted may now be irrevocably compromised, leaving me to wonder if the love I believed in is strong enough to withstand the scrutiny of truth. And so, each day becomes a delicate balancing act, a constant negotiation between the warmth of memories and the harsh light of reality, a journey that leaves me both hopeful and haunted by the very nature of our intertwined destinies. It was a day that began like any other, yet I sensed from the moment I woke that everything was about to change. The air in our apartment felt unusually heavy, laden with the weight of the unspoken issues that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. As I sat at the breakfast table, the aroma of coffee mingling with the soft clatter of dishes, I mustered the courage to broach a subject that I had been dreading for months, the need for a paternity test. I remember the exact moment when I brought it up. My voice trembled with a mixture of hope and apprehension, and I tried to explain that verifying Lily's paternity was not an accusation against Claudia's integrity, but rather an act of protecting our daughter's future. I wanted it to be understood as a means of affirming the love and commitment that had always been the cornerstone of our lives. Yet, the reaction that followed was one I had feared. A fierce, almost primal rejection that left me reeling. Claudia's expression shifted in an instant. The warmth in her eyes was replaced by a hardness that spoke of wounded pride and unyielding resistance. Her face contorted with anger and hurt as she insisted that the mere suggestion of a DNA test was an insult, a challenge to the very foundation of our love. In that charged moment, every word she uttered cut deeper than I could have imagined, each syllable echoing the silent accusation that perhaps my trust was misplaced. I found myself at a loss for words, stunned by the intensity of her reaction. It was as if my simple request had unleashed a torrent of emotions that had been bottled up for far too long, and in that moment, I realized that what I had hoped would be a rational discussion had instead become a battleground for our deepest insecurities. I vividly recall how her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mixture of indignation and sorrow that betrayed the complexity of her feelings. In that instant, the conversation took on a life of its own, a collision of love, pride, and vulnerability that left me questioning whether I could ever fully understand the depths of her pain. Claudia's voice, usually so gentle and reassuring, now rose in a crescendo of disbelief and accusation, as if every word was an effort to deflect attention from a secret she was desperate to keep hidden. I felt both the sting of her rejection and the crushing weight of isolation, as though I had suddenly been cast adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. In the midst of that tumult, I tried to steady myself by reminding my inner self that my intentions were pure, that my plea was born out of a profound desire to secure our daughter's future, not to sow seeds of mistrust. I recalled the quiet evenings spent together, when Claudia's soft laughter filled the room and our shared glances held the promise of a lifetime of mutual understanding. I had believed that our love was strong enough to accommodate even the most difficult of discussions, but now I found myself confronted by a force more formidable than I had anticipated, the unyielding barrier of pride that seemed to insulate her from the truth I so desperately sought. The conversation dragged on, each minute stretching into an eternity of silence punctuated by sharp exchanges. Claudia's words, though laced with fury, also carried an undercurrent of despair, a plea for me to understand that some things, no matter how deeply they troubled me, were better left unchallenged. I tried to reason with her, to appeal to the logic that had once been the cornerstone of our shared decisions, but it was as if every attempt to engage in a calm dialogue was met with an impenetrable wall of defiance. The more I pressed, the more vehemently she resisted, until what had started as a simple request transformed into a full-blown confrontation, a collision of two worlds that had long been intertwined yet were now rapidly diverging. In that moment, I realized that the very act of asking for a paternity test had become symbolic, a representation of the broader struggle between a desire for undeniable truth and the need to preserve a love that, for all its imperfections, was still the cornerstone of our family. Claudia's vehement refusal was not merely an act of obstinacy. It was an expression of deep-seated fear, a fear that by testing the bonds that held us together, we might expose vulnerabilities that could lead to irrevocable damage. And so, as the conversation reached its crescendo, I was left standing in the aftermath of words that could not be unsaid, feeling as though I had inadvertently insulted the very essence of our union. The room was thick with silence once Claudia's tirade subsided, a silence that was far more painful than any argument. I sat there, the remnants of my plea lingering in the air, grappling with the realization that our relationship had reached a critical juncture. The notion of trust had been twisted into a battleground, and the simple act of seeking clarity had become an affront to a love that now felt as fragile as a delicate glass sculpture on the verge of shattering. In that charged atmosphere, I was forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, the pursuit of truth carries with it the risk of inflicting wounds that may never fully heal. The very test I had thought would secure our future now threatened to fracture the present in ways I could scarcely have imagined. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying that confrontation over and over in my mind, each recollection reinforcing the painful realization that the issue at hand was far more complex than I had initially believed. Claudia's refusal was not merely a reaction to the prospect of a test. It was a manifestation of deep-seated insecurities and fears, a desperate attempt to hold onto a version of our past that had become too precious to risk tarnishing. And so, as I attempted to reconcile the man I once knew with the reality of the woman before me, I was left with a lingering question. Could the foundation of our love withstand the corrosive force of doubt, or was this moment the harbinger of a rupture that would forever alter the fabric of our lives? In the quiet solitude of my thoughts, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, and that the quest for clarity, though necessary, might come at a cost I was only beginning to fathom. In the weeks that followed that devastating confrontation, a heavy silence settled over our home, a silence that was punctuated by the unspoken knowledge that nothing would ever be the same. I spent countless hours turning the issue over in my mind, weighing my love for Claudia and Lily against the crushing burden of uncertainty. Every attempt at a peaceful resolution was met with an unyielding wall of defiance, and I began to realize that the only path left was one that demanded an external affirmation of the truth I so desperately sought. Reluctantly, with a heart that was both resolute and aching, I found myself compelled to take the legal route, a decision that, in its own way, felt like an admission that our private battles had spiraled beyond the point of personal reconciliation. Filing the motion with family court was not a decision I arrived at lightly. I spent long nights poring over legal texts and seeking advice from trusted friends and professionals, each conversation underscoring the gravity of the situation. In the quiet of the early morning hours, before the city had fully awakened, I would sit at my desk, the faint glow of a desk lamp illuminating stacks of legal documents, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The thought of involving the law in what was once an intimate family matter felt like a betrayal, a sacrifice of our private lives on the altar of public scrutiny. Yet, I also understood that without definitive evidence, the persistent doubt would continue to fester, poisoning the delicate fabric of our family life. Every signature on those legal papers was a reluctant act of self-preservation, a desperate bid to reclaim a sense of certainty in a world that had become increasingly murky and unpredictable. I remember the moment I handed over the signed documents to our attorney, a mixture of relief and dread washing over me in equal measure. In that exchange, I felt as though I was sealing my fate, opening a door to a realm where emotions would be subjected to the cold, unyielding logic of the law. It was a stark contrast to the warmth of our once shared dreams, and I could not help but wonder if, in the process of seeking clarity, I was inadvertently condemning the love that had defined so much of my life. The legal process itself was an arduous journey, marked by endless meetings, consultations, and the sterile language of courtrooms that seemed so distant from the intimate struggles of the human heart. I found myself attending session after session, each one a stark reminder that our personal turmoil was now being dissected and analyzed in a public forum. In the halls of justice, I felt exposed, vulnerable to judgments not just of the law, but of society at large. The whispers of onlookers, the disapproving glances of acquaintances, and the relentless scrutiny of every step we took in this process made it painfully clear that the matter was no longer confined to the four walls of our home. With every new legal document and every stern word from our attorney, I could feel the chasm between Claudia and me widening further. The legal push was relentless, an unstoppable force that demanded answers regardless of the personal cost. I was driven by a deep-seated need to safeguard Lily's future, convinced that clarity was essential for her to grow up in an environment free of doubt and suspicion. Yet, with each passing day, that conviction was met with an equally persistent fear. The fear that the truth, once revealed, might come at the expense of everything we had built together. In quiet moments, as I sat alone in the stark confines of my study, I would find my thoughts wandering back to simpler times. Times when love was enough to bridge any divide and when the trust between Claudia and me was unshakable. Those memories were bittersweet, serving as both a source of comfort and a painful reminder of what was now at stake. The legal motion, with its promise of truth, was also a harbinger of inevitable change, a change that could potentially shatter the fragile equilibrium of our family life. I struggled with the knowledge that this pursuit of validation, though necessary for peace of mind, was also a path that could lead to irrevocable heartbreak. Despite the turmoil, I found solace in the small moments of clarity that punctuated this legal odyssey. Each meeting with our attorney, each carefully worded statement, was a step toward reclaiming a part of myself that had been lost in the chaos of doubt and betrayal. I clung to the hope that once the truth was laid bare, we could rebuild what had been fractured, even if it meant confronting painful realities that neither of us had been prepared for. The legal proceedings, for all their impersonal rigor, were a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not on the physical plane, but in the realm of trust and emotion. As I navigated this relentless legal push, I began to understand that the journey toward truth was as much about internal reconciliation as it was about external validation. Each signature, each court filing, was an acknowledgement that the path to healing was paved with difficult choices and sacrifices. I resolved that no matter the outcome, I would face the consequences with honesty and integrity, determined to protect Lily's future and to salvage what remained of the love that had once been the cornerstone of our lives. In the cold, unyielding language of the law, I sought the warmth of certainty, a clarity that, once attained, would allow me to finally lay the ghosts of doubt to rest. The day of the court hearing arrived with an intensity that was almost palpable, the morning air thick with anticipation and a quiet dread that weighed on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. I entered the austere courtroom in downtown White Plains with a mixture of trepidation and reluctant hope, acutely aware that this moment would mark a turning point in our lives. Every step I took down the long corridor seemed to echo with the silent judgments of those who had come before me, and I felt as if I were stepping into a space where personal pain was measured against the impartial coldness of legal proceedings. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was clinical, a stark contrast to the emotional storm raging within me. I took my seat, each passing second a reminder that the fate of my family was about to be subjected to the unforgiving scrutiny of the law. As the proceedings began, I listened intently to every word spoken, the steady cadence of legal jargon providing a somber soundtrack to the tumultuous feelings that churned inside me. When the judge finally delivered the ruling, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The temporary order mandating a DNA test was read aloud, a pronouncement that was as much an affirmation of my right to seek truth as it was a stark ultimatum to Claudia. In that moment, I experienced a surge of conflicting emotions, relief that my long-held need for clarity was finally being validated, yet also a profound sense of dread for what might lie ahead. The court's decision was not just a legal mandate. It was an irreversible step that signaled the beginning of a new, uncertain chapter in our lives. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room as the judge's words resonated around me, a mixture of silent support and thinly veiled disapproval that made my heart race. The decision to compel the test, though cloaked in the language of justice, felt deeply personal. It was as if the cold apparatus of the legal system had been turned inward, dissecting the very essence of our familial bond. In that moment, I was forced to confront a reality that was both liberating and terrifying. The relief that came from having the court's backing was tempered by the knowledge that the test might expose truths too painful to bear, truths that could forever alter the fabric of our family. I sat there, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, trying to steady the rapid beat of my heart as the judge's final words echoed in the sterile air. The legal verdict had given me the validation I had long sought, yet it also cast a long shadow over the future, one where the sanctity of our home would be scrutinized under the unforgiving lens of DNA analysis. I remember the silent conversations that ensued in that moment, the internal dialogue in which I weighed the promise of clarity against the risk of irrevocable damage. In the midst of this storm of emotions, I resolved that I would accept the court's ultimatum, regardless of the cost. The truth, I believed, was worth any sacrifice, even if it meant risking the very bonds I had fought so hard to protect. Leaving the courtroom was like emerging from a dark tunnel into an uncertain dawn. The crisp air outside did little to ease the turmoil that churned within me. I walked slowly to my car, each step heavy with the realization that the path ahead was fraught with emotional landmines. The public nature of the proceedings only compounded my sense of vulnerability, as I was acutely aware that our private family drama had now become a matter of public record. Strangers passing by on the busy street offered nothing more than fleeting glances, their eyes oblivious to the life-altering decision that had just been handed down. In those moments, I was painfully aware of the fine line between personal agony and the relentless march of a legal process that cared little for individual heartbreak. Inside my car, as I sat in the quiet solitude of that confined space, I allowed myself a moment of introspection. The ruling was not merely a bureaucratic formality. It was a turning point that would force us to confront uncomfortable truths. I could almost hear my own voice urging me to brace for the inevitable confrontation that would follow, a confrontation that might bring with it a clarity that was as painful as it was necessary. The DNA test, now mandated by the court, was a promise of resolution. A promise that, despite the turmoil, might one day restore a semblance of order to our chaotic lives. Yet, I also understood that with every revelation came the risk of irreparable loss. The delicate balance of our family was now suspended in a state of anxious limbo, each day stretching out before me as an endless series of questions with no immediate answers. I knew that this moment would be etched into my memory forever. A day when the cold hand of the law reached into the intimate sanctuary of my home and demanded to know the truth. The ruling had set in motion a series of events that would test the resilience of our bond and force me to navigate the labyrinth of emotions with unwavering resolve. As I drove away from the courthouse, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on my mind, yet I clung to a sliver of hope that, once the truth was unveiled, I would finally be able to find a path toward healing and redemption. The courtroom scene had been a maelstrom of raw emotion and biting words, but nothing could have prepared me for the fallout that would follow immediately after the judge's ruling. In the days that ensued, the reverberations of that moment rippled through our family, each echo a stark reminder that the fragile illusion of normalcy was rapidly dissolving. I still remember the exact moment when Claudia's reaction became a spectacle in itself, a reaction that transcended private sorrow and spilled into the realm of public hysteria. It was as if the mere act of ordering a DNA test had unlatched a floodgate of pent-up fury, humiliation, and despair. The first time I witnessed her breakdown, we were in the cramped confines of our living room, the remnants of a once happy home now overshadowed by the enormity of the situation. Claudia's eyes, normally so controlled and resolute, had become wild with a potent mixture of indignation and panic. Her voice, once a soothing balm during troubled times, now rang out in a series of frantic accusations and desperate cries, a torrent of words that spilled over with venom and heartache. I remember how she clutched at her chest, as if trying to stem an invisible tide of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her, her words blurring together in a cacophony of protest. Every sentence she uttered was laced with a raw intensity that left me both shaken and profoundly saddened. In that moment, as I stood there trying to piece together the shattered fragments of our once solid foundation, I felt a deep sense of humiliation. Not for myself, but for the public unraveling of a life that had once seemed so enviably secure. The reaction was not confined to our home. It spilled out into the open, turning private despair into a public spectacle. Friends and family, who had long been silent observers of our internal struggles, now found themselves thrust into a drama that was as deeply personal as it was painfully visible. The whispered conversations in the corridors of our community, the furtive glances of acquaintances who no longer knew how to approach us, all compounded the sting of the moment. Claudia's hysterical outburst was a raw, unfiltered expression of the hurt and betrayal she felt. I could see in her eyes the torment of a woman who believed that the very foundation of her identity was being challenged, a challenge that went far beyond the realm of a simple paternity test. It was as if every unspoken insecurity, every suppressed fear, had found its voice in that explosive moment. Her reaction, unbridled and all-consuming, left me reeling with a mixture of sorrow, anger, and an overwhelming sense of helplessness. I felt trapped between the desire to comfort her and the need to stand by the unwavering pursuit of truth. In the midst of the chaos, I could sense that her reaction was not just about the present crisis, but was rooted in a deeper, more long-standing fear. A fear that our carefully constructed world was crumbling beneath us. The intensity of her response made it painfully clear that this was not a dispute that could be resolved by logic or calm conversation. Instead, it was an emotional eruption that had long been brewing beneath the surface, now unleashed with a force that neither of us had anticipated. I listened as she hurled accusations, each one laced with a desperation that spoke of a lifetime of unaddressed wounds. The woman I had once known, a partner who had shared my dreams and hopes, had become a stranger in that moment, consumed by a tempest of emotions that left little room for rational thought. Outside, the whispers of onlookers and the concerned looks of passers-by only served to amplify the intensity of the situation. I felt as if we were trapped in a gilded cage of our own making, where every emotion was magnified, every reaction scrutinized. The public nature of Claudia's breakdown was both mortifying and a stark reminder of the personal costs of our private battles. I found myself questioning how something so intrinsically intimate could become fodder for public spectacle, how the sanctity of our family life had been so irreversibly breached by forces beyond our control. In that moment, the legal proceedings were no longer just about resolving an unanswered question. They had become a crucible in which the very essence of who we were as a family was being tested and exposed for all to see. Despite the chaos, I felt an inescapable pull to remain steadfast, to navigate this storm with a sense of calm that belied the tumult inside me. Even as Claudia's voice rose in hysterical fervor and her tears blurred the lines between pain and anger, I held on to the belief that the truth, once revealed, would ultimately pave the way for healing. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional pitfalls and the potential for irreparable damage, yet I knew that I had to persevere. I resolved to protect Lily's future, to ensure that amid the public humiliation and private heartbreak, our daughter would remain the beacon of hope that guided me forward. In the days that followed, I found myself repeatedly revisiting that moment of hysteria, each recollection a blend of sorrow and determination. Claudia's reaction had unmasked the raw vulnerability that lay beneath the surface, a vulnerability that I had long suspected but had never fully confronted. It was a reminder that the issues we faced were not merely legal or procedural, but were deeply intertwined with the emotional bedrock of our relationship. And so, as the storm of public opinion raged and the whispers of scandal grew louder, I held on to the conviction that truth, however painful, was the only path to redemption. The world around us might see only the spectacle of a woman in tears and a man burdened by doubt, but in my heart, I knew that this was a critical juncture, a moment that would ultimately force us to confront the painful reality of our intertwined fates. In the quiet aftermath of the courtroom drama and the explosive fallout that followed, I found solace in the long, hushed hours spent in the company of our attorney. The sterile confines of a modest law office became a sanctuary where, for a few precious hours, I could dissect the tumultuous events that had upended our lives. There, amid stacks of documents and the low hum of fluorescent lights, I was forced to confront the legal realities of our personal crisis, a confrontation that was as painful as it was necessary. Sitting across from our attorney, I felt the gravity of every word he spoke, each one laden with the cold logic of the law, a logic that seemed so distant from the searing emotions that now defined my every waking moment. We pored over court transcripts and reviewed the minutiae of the hearing with a painstaking attention to detail, each document a piece of a puzzle that was as complex as the lives it represented. Every meeting with him felt like stepping behind a curtain that separated the public face of our trial from the raw, unfiltered truth that lay beneath. In this space, I was forced to face not only the legal ramifications of the court's ruling, but also the stark reality of what had become of my once happy family. The process was clinical, almost mechanical in its precision, yet beneath the surface, I sensed a tension that echoed the emotional storm raging within me. We spoke at length about the next steps, the potential outcomes of the mandated DNA test, and the implications each possibility might have for our future. The conversation was a delicate dance of legal strategy and personal anguish, as I tried to reconcile my desire for clarity with the fear of what that clarity might ultimately reveal. In the quiet corners of that office, I began to see the legal proceedings not as a distant, impersonal force, but as an intricate reflection of the emotional labyrinth I was trapped in. Every document I signed, every clause I agreed to, was a tangible acknowledgement that our personal struggles had now become entangled with the cold machinery of the legal system. I remember the feeling of the pen in my hand as I signed yet another form, an act that seemed so trivial in isolation, yet in that moment, it felt like sealing a fate that was slowly slipping out of my control. The act of signing was a silent declaration that I was willing to subject our private turmoil to the scrutiny of the law, that I believed the truth was worth the price of potential public humiliation and personal heartache. As our attorney outlined the next steps in our case, I could not help but feel a profound sense of isolation. The legal jargon, though necessary for the process, felt alien and detached from the warmth of the memories I held dear. Each technical term and procedural nuance was a reminder that our intimate struggles had been reduced to a series of checkboxes and filings, a reduction that felt both dehumanizing and, in a strange way, reassuring. Behind that legal veneer, however, lay the raw, unvarnished truth of our situation, a truth that was as inescapable as it was painful. I listened intently as my attorney explained the possible outcomes of the DNA test, the scenarios that might emerge, each one carrying its own set of consequences for our family. With every explanation, I felt a chill run down my spine, acutely aware that the final verdict was a double-edged sword. It could either vindicate my long-held certainty or expose a betrayal so deep that it would alter the course of our lives irreversibly. In those long sessions, I found myself caught in a paradox. The legal process, with its methodical pace and measured language, offered a semblance of order amid the chaos of my emotions. Yet, for every moment of clarity it provided, I was reminded of the deep emotional wounds that lay just beneath the surface, wounds that no amount of legal precision could ever hope to heal. There was a stark disconnect between the cold, clinical analysis of our attorney and the searing pain of a father questioning the very foundation of his identity. I began to realize that the legal battle was but one facet of a much larger struggle, a struggle for truth, for trust, and for the redemption of a love that had been so cruelly tested. Each day spent behind the legal curtain was a journey into the heart of that struggle. I learned to navigate the labyrinth of court filings and procedural delays, all the while grappling with the emotional toll that each step imposed. I clung to the belief that clarity, once attained, would be a balm for my troubled soul, a promise that the truth, however painful, would ultimately set us free from the cycle of uncertainty. And so, as I sat there in that sterile office, surrounded by the unyielding logic of legal documentation, I resolved that I would face the coming days with the same quiet determination that had always defined me. The legal process might be impersonal and unfeeling, but it represented my last hope for uncovering the truth, a truth that I believed was essential for the healing of our fractured family. In the soft glow of that office, with the hum of the air conditioner as my only companion, I vowed to persevere. I vowed that I would not allow the cold corridors of the law to strip away the humanity of our plight. Instead, I would use every tool at my disposal, every word, every document, every carefully measured sentence, to piece together a future where clarity replaced doubt, where truth became the cornerstone of a renewed trust. Though the road ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, I knew that facing it head-on was the only path to redemption. Each session, each meeting, each review of legal text was a step toward reclaiming not just the integrity of our family, but also the fractured parts of my own soul. Behind the legal curtain, I found the strength to keep going, a quiet determination to ensure that, come what may, the truth would emerge as the beacon that guided us through the darkest of times. Now, as the days slip by with the slow inevitability of a pendulum swing, I find myself caught in a state of anxious anticipation, each moment weighted with the expectation that the truth will soon come to light. The waiting is a torment all its own, a relentless cycle of hope intermingled with dread, where every tick of the clock serves as a reminder of the unresolved questions that haunt me. I watch Lily as she plays in our modest backyard, her laughter a bittersweet melody that stands in stark contrast to the heavy silence that fills my thoughts. She is blissfully unaware of the storm of legal battles and emotional turmoil swirling around her, a gentle innocence that unks the stakes of this painful journey. Every time I see her, I am reminded of the love that brought me to this point, yet also of the unyielding need for certainty that has driven me to the brink of despair. Each day in this liminal state feels interminable, a delicate balance between the comfort of routine and the overwhelming weight of uncertainty. I have learned to measure time not by the hours that pass, but by the mounting questions that seem to grow louder with each sunrise. The silence of the waiting period is punctuated by my own inner dialogue, a constant stream of thoughts that oscillate between cautious optimism and the paralyzing fear of what the DNA test might reveal. I replay every memory in my mind, every detail of the moments leading up to this legal ultimatum, trying to decipher hidden signs that might confirm or refute the certainty I hold in my heart. Yet, with each recollection, I am met with more questions than answers, leaving me adrift in a sea of conflicting emotions. In the quiet solitude of our home, I have taken to wandering the familiar corridors, seeking solace in the smallest of comforts. A worn-out armchair by the window, a family photograph that captures happier times, the gentle murmur of a song on the radio. These simple pleasures, though seemingly trivial, serve as anchors in a world rocked by the possibility of irrevocable change. As I pace the floor, I try to engage in a silent dialogue with the universe, imploring it to offer some sign, some reassurance that the truth, once revealed, will not only affirm my deepest convictions, but also pave the way for healing. I remind myself that no matter how dire the outcome might seem, the revelation of truth is the first step toward rebuilding what has been fractured. Even as the legal process marches forward, each new day is marked by a series of small rituals. A morning cup of coffee sipped in quiet contemplation, a brief moment of reflection before the hustle of the day begins, the fleeting smile of Lily as she greets me at the door, that ground me in the present. Yet, beneath these moments of routine lies an undercurrent of urgency, a pressing need to resolve the uncertainty that has cast such a long shadow over our lives. I find myself yearning for the moment when the final DNA results will arrive, a moment when the long, drawn-out wait will finally yield a definitive answer. That day, I believe, will bring both relief and a reckoning with the truths that have been hidden for far too long. The waiting is both a test of endurance and a crucible in which my emotions are continually refined. I have come to accept that this period of uncertainty is as much a part of the process as the legal proceedings themselves, a necessary interval during which every hope and fear is magnified. In these moments, I am forced to confront the inherent fragility of the life we have built, acknowledging that beneath the surface of everyday routines lies a complexity of emotion that defies simple explanation. I have learned to find strength in this struggle, to see the waiting as an opportunity for introspection, a time to examine not only my love for Lily, but also my own resilience in the face of uncertainty. At times, the silence is almost unbearable, a void filled with unspoken questions and the relentless ticking of the clock. I catch myself looking at the phone, as if expecting it to ring at any moment with the long-awaited news. In those fleeting instants, I imagine all the possible outcomes, each one a potential turning point that could either restore the harmony of our family or plunge us into deeper chaos. It is a delicate dance between hope and despair, a balance that I strive to maintain even as the truth looms on the horizon like a specter that both beckons and terrifies. I have begun to see that the waiting, for all its torment, is also a period of transformation. It is in this crucible of uncertainty that I am forced to confront my deepest fears and to re-examine the very nature of love and trust. The relentless passage of time is both a burden and a teacher, urging me to accept that some answers may come only with pain, and that the clarity I seek might be accompanied by a new set of challenges. Even as the DNA results remain pending, I find a measure of solace in the belief that the truth, once revealed, will serve as a catalyst for change. A change that, though perhaps difficult to endure, holds the promise of a future unburdened by the weight of doubt. In the midst of this waiting, I have come to appreciate the small moments of beauty that still exist. A gentle smile from Lily, the quiet strength of Claudia in moments of vulnerability, and the silent resilience that I have discovered within myself. Each of these moments is a testament to the fact that even in the darkest times, hope can be found. I have learned that the pursuit of truth, while fraught with uncertainty, is an act of love, a commitment to ensuring that the foundation of our family is built on honesty, however painful that honesty might be. And so, I continue to wait, day by day, clinging to the belief that the dawn will eventually break through the long night of uncertainty, bringing with it the light of a truth that has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. In the quiet solitude of the long, sleepless nights that have become all too familiar, I often find myself revisiting the winding path that led me to this crossroads, a journey marked by moments of profound love intermingled with searing doubt. There is a certain irony in the way life unfolds. The very passion that once united us now stands as a stark contrast to the uncertainty that shadows every step I take. I remember those early days when every look, every whispered promise, carried with it the assurance of an unbreakable bond. Back then, love was a simple, all-encompassing force that left no room for questioning or second-guessing. Every shared dream, every tender embrace, was a testament to the unwavering certainty that we were meant to be together, a truth that now seems as fragile as a gossamer thread. As I sit in the dim glow of my study, surrounded by remnants of happier times, faded photographs, handwritten letters, and souvenirs from vacations long past, I cannot help but be struck by the weight of memory. These tangible pieces of our history are both comforting and painful, each one a reminder of a love that once seemed invincible, yet now appears to be burdened by the relentless pull of doubt. In the quiet moments before sleep, I replay our journey together, the laughter and the shared promises, and I search for clues in the echoes of our past. I wonder if there was ever a moment when the certainty I once felt began to waver, a subtle shift in tone, a hesitant glance, a fleeting moment of silence that hinted at the hidden fissures forming beneath our seemingly perfect surface. The passage of time has a peculiar way of distorting memories. What once felt pure and uncomplicated now carries with it the weight of complex emotions. I recall the countless nights we spent wrapped in each other's arms, the comfort of a love that seemed to defy the world outside, and I contrast those memories with the cold, unyielding scrutiny that now defines our present. In my heart, I have always believed that love, in its truest form, should be enough to overcome any obstacle. Yet, as the days have unfolded, I have come to realize that even love is not immune to the corrosive effects of doubt. The very act of questioning what once was an unquestionable truth has forced me to re-examine every facet of our relationship, a process that is as painful as it is necessary. In these reflective moments, I grapple with a cascade of emotions that seem to pull me in opposing directions. On one hand, there is the fierce, unyielding love I have for Lily, a love so profound that it has defined my existence. On the other, there is the gnawing fear that the very foundation of that love might be built on an illusion, a mirage that could dissipate at the slightest touch of scrutiny. This internal battle is one I have fought in silence for far too long, a battle between the heart that yearns for unwavering certainty and the mind that is haunted by the possibility of betrayal. As I search for answers in the quiet of the night, I find that each memory is tinged with a bittersweet blend of joy and sorrow, a duality that mirrors the complexity of the human heart. I have come to see that Claudia's refusal to consider a paternity test was not simply an act of denial or obstinacy. It was, in many ways, a desperate attempt to preserve an idealized version of our past. In her eyes, the need for external validation was a threat to the sanctity of our love, a challenge that would force us to confront aspects of our history that were perhaps better left untouched. Yet, while I understand the desire to hold onto the perfect image of what once was, I also know that clinging to such illusions can only delay the inevitable confrontation with reality. The truth, no matter how painful, is a necessary component of healing, a harsh but essential step toward rebuilding trust and moving forward. In the solitude of these reflective hours, I am compelled to acknowledge the inherent complexity of love. It is not a static force but a living, breathing entity that evolves with time and experience. The passion that once united us has, over the years, been tempered by the realities of life, the challenges, the disappointments, and the unrelenting pressures of maintaining an ideal. And yet, even as doubt has crept into the corners of my mind, I remain fiercely protective of the love I have for Lily. It is a love that transcends the limitations of human frailty, a love that, despite the scars of uncertainty, continues to shine as a beacon of hope in even the darkest of times. As I reflect on the tangled interplay of love and doubt, I find myself questioning whether it is possible for these two seemingly antithetical forces to coexist harmoniously. Is it possible to hold on to the certainty of love while acknowledging the existence of doubt? The answer, I have come to realize, is not simple. Perhaps it is in the very act of wrestling with these conflicting emotions that true strength is forged, an inner fortitude that allows us to accept that perfection is an illusion and that the beauty of life lies in its imperfections. I have begun to see that my struggle is not one of choosing between love and doubt, but of learning to embrace both as integral parts of my identity. In this moment of introspection, I resolve to let the truth, however painful, be the catalyst for a deeper understanding of myself and the love that binds us. I acknowledge that the journey ahead may be fraught with hardship and uncertainty, but I also believe that by confronting these challenges head-on, I can emerge stronger, more compassionate, and better equipped to navigate the complexities of our shared existence. The reflections on love and doubt have taught me that vulnerability is not a weakness but a doorway to genuine connection. A reminder that it is only by facing our deepest fears that we can truly appreciate the fullness of our humanity.